Hello everyone. Today we will talk about memoized functions in JavaScript. We will understand why we need memoized functions and what is the best way to create a memoized function. I am using Node.js environment for this tutorial, but you can apply the learning from this tutorial to client-side applications as well. So I have created a JavaScript file memoizedfunctions.js and I have defined three functions in it. The first function checks for the prime number, the second function generates a random number, and the third function finds the latitude and longitude for a given city. Now, I'm not going to get into details about how I have written these three functions since the focus of this tutorial is on memoized functions. Let's look at isPrime function. This function runs a for loop to figure out whether a number is prime or not. And for a given input, we will always get the same response. This is not performance efficient because even though we know the answer, we are again performing the same steps over and over again for the subsequent calls. If we can store the results in a cache and return the cached results, then we don't have to recompute everything. And we can improve the performance if we implement a function that way. And a function which keeps the cache and returns the cached result, if there is one, is known as a memoized function. So as you can see in the picture, we will first check whether the input is present in the cache. If there is one, we will just return the response from the cache. Otherwise, we'll compute the result, store it in the cache, and then return the response. So for isPrime function, we can create a memoized function in order to improve the performance. Now let's look at another function. It is getRandom function. Here, we expect a different value to be returned for the same input. And this is because we want to generate a random number. And since it's a random number, we cannot cache the results. And hence, we cannot create a memoized function for it. Let's look at one last function. It is an asynchronous function. And this function returns the latitude and longitude for a given city. And we expect the same response for a given city. And hence, we can create a memoized function for it. So in general, if we always want the same output to be returned for a given input, we can store the results in a cache and we can write a memoized function for it. Now that we have some understanding about memoized functions, let's write a memoized function. So I'm going to write a memoized function in such a way that it can be used across all the functions. And this will give us the flexibility of extending any functions to a memoized function functionality. So I will go to the top and the first thing that I will do here is I'm going to import fetch from node fetch because I am using Node.js environment and fetch is not available in the Node.js. So I would need to import it from an external library. And the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to import BTOA from this BTOA package. This BTOA function will give a unique key for a given set of input. And if you are using a memoized function in the client-side environment, then you don't have to import fetch and BTOA because these functions are available on the window object. Let's save this JavaScript file and let's define our memoized function. So I'm going to create a memoized function with arrow functions. So const memoize equal to function and then that's it. So here I am wrapping this function inside this memoized function, and this is the function for which we want to create our memoized function. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to create a cache. Const cache is this, and the second thing is const async. So here we want to check whether this function is an asynchronous function or not. So I'm going to do like function dot constructor dot name is equal to async function. So this is the way to check whether a function is an asynchronous function or not. Now that we have defined cache and asynchronous, whether a function is asynchronous or not, let's return a function. So return argument. So I am accepting all the arguments that we want to pass to this function. So here the first thing is to create a key. So const key is btoa and all the arguments. So here we will get a unique key for a given set of arguments. So for example, if I pass 3 to 1, we would get a unique key for this 3 to 1 combination. If I pass 3 to 4, we would get a unique key for this combination. If I change the combination like 4, 3, 2, we would get another key. So the key would be unique to a given set of an argument. Now let's remove it. Now first I'm going to check whether the key is in cache or not. So if key in cache, then I'm just going to return the results from this cache. So I would first check whether the function is an asynchronous or not. If it is an asynchronous function, I'm going to return a promise. So promise dot resolve cache key. Otherwise, I'm just going to return the response from this cache. That's it. And if the key is not present in the cache, then we would invoke the function. So const result equal to function. So we are invoking this function with the given set of arguments. Again, we will check if the function is an asynchronous or not. If it is an asynchronous function, then we would return a promise. So result.then response. We will first store the response in the cache and then return the response. If it is not an asynchronous function, then we would simply store the result in a key and return the result. And that's it. We have created our first memoized function. I think I've made a mistake here. It should be cache and not const. Now that we have defined the memoized function, let's convert all these function to a memoized function. So I am going to write const memoize is prime is equal to memoize is prime. And then instead of invoking is prime, I'm simply going to write memoize is prime, memoize is prime. Now let's convert this to a memoized function as well. So const memoize find latitude and longitude is equal to memoize find latitude and longitude. And then instead of calling this find, we are simply going to invoke memoized find latitude and longitude. And let's invoke another memoize find latitude and longitude after 5 seconds. Set timeout. And then I'm going to invoke this everything after 5 seconds. Let's save this. So for the first memoized find latitude longitude invocation for this city, we should expect this function to be invoked and we should see this line getting printed, executing finding latitude and longitude for London. When we invoke the same function again after 5 seconds for a given set of argument, for the same argument, we should expect the value to be returned from the cache. So we should not see this getting printed again. Same with this is prime function. We should expect this console.log to be printed only once and not for the subsequent calls. So let's run this. So I'm going to write node mem Memoized functions.js. And as you can see here, executing isPrime function getting printed only once, and it is returning value -1, and the second -1 is being read from the cache. Same with this find latitude and longitude for London. For the first time we are invoking the function, the second time the value is read from the cache. I hope that you now have much better understanding of memoized functions, and now you can implement the functionality in your projects. And if you find this video useful, please share it with the others so that everyone can learn, and I will see you in another video.